The night Elizabeth reached the edge arrived quietly without warning. There was no storm, no argument, no dramatic final blow. The mansion slept as it always did, heavy, distant, indifferent. Lanterns flickered softly along the corridors, casting long shadows that stretched and retreated like silent witnesses. Elizabeth sat alone in her room, the door closed, the world held at arm's length. Her reflection stared back at her from the tall mirror opposite the bed. She barely recognized the woman gazing back. Her face was thinner now, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and unspoken grief. The wheelchair framed her body like a sentence already passed. She touched the glass lightly, as if confirming that she still existed. For months, perhaps longer, she had lived in a constant state of endurance. Wake, eat, sit, watch, sleep, repeat. Days blended into one another until time itself felt meaningless. Hope had not vanished suddenly. It had eroded slowly, grain by grain, until nothing solid remained. That night, the emptiness felt heavier than usual. Elizabeth thought of her mother, not as she had died, but as she had lived. She remembered the warmth of her embrace, the way she used to say Elizabeth's name as though it were precious. She wondered what her mother would think if she could see her now. The thought hurt too much to bear. She wheeled herself closer to the window and looked out at the grounds below. Moonlight bathed the estate in pale silver, disguising its cruelty beneath beauty. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere closer, the faint murmur of voices drifted from the slaves' quarters before fading again into silence. Life continued, just not hers. Elizabeth felt a strange calm settle over her, a numbness that frightened her more than despair ever had. Pain, at least, meant she still cared. This felt like release. She reached for the small drawer beside her bed and opened it slowly. Inside lay a thin blade, hidden there weeks ago. She had not planned anything, not really. She had simply wanted to know it was there, an option, a door, however terrifying, that did not require permission. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. "I don't want to die," she whispered into the stillness. "I just don't want to be here." Tears blurred her vision. She imagined what it would be like to finally rest, to no longer wake up feeling like a mistake. She imagined silence without judgment, darkness without fear. She imagined seeing her mother again. Elizabeth pressed the blade against her palm, just enough to feel its cold certainty. A thin line of pain cut through the numbness, grounding her momentarily in the present. She hesitated. Fear crept in. Not of death, but of failing even at this. Of surviving and being punished. Of becoming an even greater burden than she already was. Her breathing grew shallow. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to leave." She lowered the blade and let it fall to the floor with a soft clink. For a long moment she sat there shaking, tears streaming freely now. Her chest ached with a grief too large to contain. She cried for her mother, for the girl she used to be, for the woman she had never been allowed to become. She cried because no one would hear her. And that realization, that her absence would barely register, was almost enough to push her over the edge. Almost. A knock sounded at the door. Elizabeth froze. The blade lay on the floor between her feet. Her heart pounded violently, fear and shame rushing through her in equal measure. "Elizabeth," a voice called softly from the other side. It was her father. She quickly nudged the blade under the bed with her foot, wiping her eyes with trembling hands. It took her a moment to find her voice. "Yes," she said, barely audible. The door opened slightly. Her father stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the corridor light. He did not enter fully. He rarely did. "I need to speak with you tomorrow," he said. His tone was measured, distant. "There is a matter to be resolved." Elizabeth nodded, though dread coiled tightly in her stomach. He paused, as if considering something else. then turned away without another word. The door closed. Elizabeth stared at it long after he had gone. Something was coming. She could feel it. The house felt tense, as though holding its breath. Whatever decision her father was preparing would not be for her benefit. Of that she was certain. She bent down slowly and retrieved the blade, placing it back in the drawer. Not out of renewed hope, but because something inside her whispered that this night was not the end. Yet. Elizabeth wheeled herself back to the bed and lay down, staring at the ceiling until dawn began to creep faintly into the room. She had stood at the edge, and though she had stepped back, she knew deep in her bones that she could not survive many more nights like this. If nothing changed, something would break, and next time, she might not pull back. Morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the mansion, illuminating polished floors and ornate walls, as if beauty itself could erase what had been decided in the dark. Elizabeth sat in her room, hands folded in her lap, waiting. She had barely slept. Her father's words from the night before echoed endlessly in her mind. A matter to be resolved. She knew what the tone meant. When the summons finally came, it was delivered not by her father, but by a servant who would not meet her eyes. Elizabeth followed the familiar corridors toward the main hall, each turn tightening the knot in her chest. The house felt different, tense, alert, as though it too anticipated the outcome. Her father stood near the long windows, his back to her. Several men were present, including overseers and elders of the estate. Beyond the open doors, slaves stood gathered in uneasy silence, summoned without explanation. Elizabeth felt suddenly small. "Come forward," her father said, not turning around. She did. Her wheelchair rolled to a stop beside him. He glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. There was no warmth in his gaze, only calculation, the look of a man arranging pieces on a board. "I have made a decision regarding your future," he said. Elizabeth swallowed hard. "You can no longer remain as you are," he continued, "unmarried, unproductive, a burden." The words struck her like a blow. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. Her father turned toward the gathered slaves. His eyes moved over them, slowly, deliberately, as though he were choosing an object rather than addressing human beings. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, confusion, fear, curiosity. Then his gaze stopped. Elizabeth followed it. The man he settled on stood tall among the others, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, his posture calm and steady. His presence was unmistakable. He did not shift under scrutiny, did not lower his eyes. His name, Elizabeth knew, was Kofi. She had noticed him before, from the window from afar, but had never stood so close. "Kofi," her father said, "step forward." Kofi obeyed, moving with controlled strength. He stopped a few paces away, his face composed, eyes steady. "You will take my daughter as your wife," her father said plainly. The words hung in the air like a sentence passed. Gasps erupted around them. Overseers exchanged shocked glances. The slaves murmured among themselves. Elizabeth felt as though the floor had vanished beneath her. She stared at her father, disbelief flooding her veins. "You cannot mean this," she whispered. He did not look at her. "She is no longer fit for any other arrangement," he said, as though she were not present. "You will house her, care for her. In exchange, you will receive favor and protection." Elizabeth felt something inside her collapse. She was being given away, not out of hope, not out of love, but out of convenience, disposed of, removed. Her gaze shifted to Kofi. She expected to see reluctance, discomfort, perhaps even resentment. Instead, she saw something else: respect. Kofi did not smile. He did not gloat. He did not bow his head in submission. He looked at Elizabeth, not at her wheelchair, not at her perceived weakness, but at her face. And then slowly he bowed. "I will care for her," he said. His voice was deep, steady, devoid of cruelty. Elizabeth's heart pounded violently. She felt exposed, humiliated, terrified. She wanted to scream, to protest, to run, yet her body betrayed her, as it always did. Her father nodded, satisfied. "Then it is done." No ceremony, no blessing, no question of consent. Elizabeth was wheeled away shortly after, her thoughts a tangled storm of fear and disbelief. Her siblings watched her pass, some with satisfaction, others with thinly veiled disgust. "Finally," she heard one of them say, "she's no longer our problem." The words burned. By evening, her belongings were packed. Not all of them, only what was deemed necessary. She was not being sent off as a bride, but as a responsibility. When the time came to leave the mansion, Elizabeth looked back only once. The house stood as it always had, beautiful, unfeeling, untouched by the lives it had broken. She felt no sorrow leaving it behind, only exhaustion. Kofi waited near a modest dwelling at the edge of the estate. As Elizabeth was helped inside, she braced herself for what she believed would be another chapter of degradation. But when the door closed behind them, something unexpected happened. Kofi turned to her and spoke softly. "You are safe here," he said. "No one will harm you." Elizabeth stared at him, confused. No one had ever promised her safety before, and though fear still wrapped tightly around her heart, a small, fragile thought stirred for the first time in years. That perhaps this decision, forced and unchosen, might not be the punishment she believed it to be.